Welcome to the Problem Properties podcast. I am your host, Catherine Veer, and every week we delve into the problems that properties have that are slightly less visible than the ordinary. So here we investigate any psychic activity that may be going on, any emotional imprints from previous owners that might still be layered into the walls and adding layers of toxicity to what you're living in. Or it might be that you have a property that cannot sell for love nor money nor any amount of refurbishing that you're doing. Whatever your problem is with your property, if you think that there might be something slightly under the bonnet going on that you are interested in finding out about, we look into and explore and are detectives on the more intuitive levels about what is going on and finding out the logical causes and being able to shift them for you. Welcome to the Problem Properties podcast. I am your host, Catherine Veer. And this week I have a wonderful guest with me. Her name is Dawn Lucht. And Dawn is a highly skilled and intuitive relationship coach. And she is an expert in things like codependency, narcissistic patterns. She's also been in and recovered from domestic violence and abuse. So she's been through an awful lot personally. And now she works primarily with women who want more for themselves and their relationships, being a teacher, a guide, coach, and a podcaster herself. So wonderful range of skills and experience that you bring here, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Catherine.
And today we are going to be exploring something slightly different on the Problem Properties podcast, because normally the work I do relates to historical, emotional, and psychic activity that has been going on in a property or in a house or on land, and finding ways of releasing and resolving all those stories and residues. But what happens when it's you yourself or the relationship that you're in that starts to create those emotional residues into your home? And that is why I have brought Dawn in today, because I was fascinated when I first spoke to her about the story she had to tell about being in a domestic violence and abusive situation and the impact that that had on her property. So I'm going to pass that over to you now, Dawn. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how that happened and what effects you think that that created for you?
Yes, happy to. So a little bit of background. We bought our house together. It was a brand new build, built on army ground. So previously it had been the army barracks, where the stables used to be. So there was already some interesting stuff that had been happening on this ground for quite a long time anyway. Not that I had any idea of any of that at all when I moved in, and hasn't really been the main focus of what happened next. But it's just interesting context that this was a brand new house. Nobody had lived in this before we moved in. And then over the course of 12 years, there was a lot of violence, emotional violence, psychological, verbal abuse. There was a very strong energy of discord and fear and abuse and much sadness. We also had a daughter who was born in this house who also died in this house, and then we brought another son into this house, and in amongst all of that was a lot of turmoil, a lot of energy that at the time I had no idea of the impact.
I'm so sorry to hear that you went through all of that.
You know, it's interesting when you start sharing your own story. It's my hero's journey, if you want to name it in those terms. And so I try not to articulate it quite like that very often, because the story carries a charge, not so much for me anymore, because I've really worked through neutralizing a lot of it, but still it activates something in somebody else who's hearing it. So I try not to deliver it in that way, but the story itself is relevant to what we're talking about today. So I thought it was appropriate. But for your listeners, if that does feel like it's bringing up something, these stories do, don't they? And be gentle with yourself as you're listening,
Oh,
if you would like to be.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
So we ended our relationship and he moved out in 2014. So I've been in here for 10 years, and the first couple of years were the most intense. He was a larger than life man. He took up a lot of emotional space, energetic space. We have a 3-bedroom townhouse on 3 floors. And when he was in this house, I couldn't understand it, but it never felt like there was enough space for anybody else but him. So even with just the 2 of us and the dog at the time, it felt full. At the time, I just thought, God, it is never going to be a house that's big enough for the both of us. Like, how come it doesn't feel big enough? So when he moved out, it felt like I suddenly had more access to space, but I could still feel his energy was here. And there would be visible signs, like there were signs of where he'd thrown stuff at me. There were dents on the walls, and there would be energetic memory packets associated with different parts of the house. The walls in the living room were vibrant, deep red, which in of itself felt aggressive. Although at the time we liked it, in hindsight, it felt very, very different. So going around the house just felt like it was very controlled. And so when he left, I spent a lot of time on a few different things. The first was changing the color of the walls, changing the furniture, putting in plants, opening the windows, and just spending some time really refreshing the space from a very practical perspective. And then as I started to do my own healing journey, I came across a woman who was talking about the energy that thoughts and emotions hold, and how they attach and how they stick around and how they create attachment to objects or attachments to yourself and things like that. And the more of this work that I was doing coincided with a couple of external situations. Like, there was all of the divorce piece, there was the custody of the child piece, as well as we had a whole load of other, like Kafkas were involved and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of external energetic charge that was being directed in towards my home as well. And so it was like I went through a dark arts training. That's how I view it, that I started to recognize that I had to become, and these were all new concepts to me, but I had to become the energetic owner of my space. And so I started to explore daily meditations of setting my space morning and night, clearing my space energetically through a portal that I had created in my bedroom, where I would pass all discordant energies through that, and working on my own energy that I was bringing into this house, and really sitting with what was coming up for me and doing my own shadow work. So I wasn't then repopulating my own space with more of these energies that were sticky.
Right. So, would you be willing to share with our listeners here how you created that portal? How do you do that? How do you even start to gather in all those discordant energies and put them into a portal in that way?
Okay, so I work with the tri-flame energy, which is the unity energy, the masculine, feminine, and the union of them both. So that's the tri-flame. And that's the energy that I'm always working with my own shadow work as well, and with my own healing, is balancing my masculine and my feminine sides to be able to bring them into a holy union together. So I would visualize this Holy Trinity flame, which is the magenta, the gold, and the aqua ray, and I would imagine them together. And I would place them in my heart, and then I would imagine it coming out of my heart and filling each of the corners of my room. And then I would imagine that the flames were on each part of the walls. And so they were taking up energetic space. For me, this is the Christ energy. This is the purest energy of love that you can create in a space, that therefore, once you've reinforced it enough times, starts to become an energetic barrier. And when you're doing that repeatedly, it starts to create its own inner structure within your home. And when you've got that structure, what happens is automatically things that are not in alignment with that energetic field start to become volatile. And so you want to be able to capture them and move them outside of the space because they're no longer welcome. So part of my own healing in terms of me and my work was about self-sovereignty and boundaries. And that's not only just my emotional boundaries, but it's also my space boundaries. So I would create this energetic space boundary in my home and read these spirits or these energies, their rights is what I mean. And I'd say, listen, you're not in alignment with this energy that I'm creating in my space, and therefore you're not welcome here. You need to leave. And my duty, therefore, is to offer them a doorway in order for them to move, because I don't want them just to leave my house and go out into the space outside of here and do whatever. I want them to be funneled somewhere. So what I created was something called an aqua portal, which is in one part of my house, and it's always there, and I can send anything from the energetics inside of my house right through to discordant thought forms that I have. When you start working with energetics of shadow healing, then you can see that thoughts have their own consciousness and their own expression too. So you can work with them and put those in the aqua portal, and then you can ask your guides to remove them safely and take them and dispose of them, compost them somewhere else. So that was point one. So I only have ownership over my space. So I can't do it over my neighbor's house. I can't do it over the edge of my boundary. So I would do this shielding in my bedroom and in my son's bedroom. I would set that every single night before I went to sleep. But I would also do my own energetic boundary. And my energetic boundary is called the 12D shield, which is using the same energy frequency that I was telling you about before, but creating like a tube around myself. And I did that 3 times a day for 7 years. And after a while, I started to feel that I could push out my own boundary and create a boundary setting around the entirety of my house, which means that then the structure of my heart resonance then became the structure of my house resonance. So then everything within this house is now in alignment with the energetic structure that I've created from my heart.
That's absolutely, I was going to say mind-blowing, but I'm going to say heart-blowing. That's absolutely heart-blowing. And I think it's just gold. That's just pure gold for people listening to understand that with effort on their part, they could be able to experience what that might be like to live within a heart resonant home that you've created yourself, that we have the power to do that. Absolutely amazing. And I would love you to clarify for us, are you still dealing with the past, or are you dealing with things that are happening every day in your life, new things that are coming into your awareness, in your feelings, your thoughts, your experiences? Or are you being under attack because you are raising all these frequencies around you?
I think I had a baptism of fire when it came to dark arts training. I was getting psychically attacked every night for a really, really long time. And that was to do with the amount of fear that I was holding from, well, just my experience. Like I've been having very, very, very bad night terrors my entire life until my relationship to my own sense of power and how I hold fear radically, radically changed. And now it's rare that I get anything like that anymore because it's just not a vibrational match to me. The structure is really solid now within my home. So I rarely get any discordant energies that come into my home unless somebody's brought something in with them, it's still really unusual. It's not often that happens at all. I have created such a safe environment within my home. That's a living and breathing expression of me that I don't really get any attacks coming in from my home now. But before I did, And it was completely in direct correlation to the shadow work I was doing on myself, whether I was aware of it or not. The stuff that was coming up was in its intention was benevolent. It wanted me to learn. But what I've learned about being in an abusive relationship is so many positive things like self-sovereignty, empowerment, self-love, releasing the people pleaser wound, learning how to be connected to my inner trust and intuition and inner guidance and all that kind of stuff has come because I had to learn those skills in order to find freedom from the experience that I was having. So whilst I was learning those, I was constantly getting situations and experiences that were coming in to say, I challenge you in this area. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to sink and shrink, or are you going to expand and grow? And I found often my house was a direct correlation of what was going on internally with me, was an external expression of that in some way, shape, or form.
And so, what is it like living in a house that is a vibrational match to you?
It's like having a nervous system balm. I think so many of us live in fight or flight the majority of time, especially if you've had any sort of trauma. And what I know as somebody who works with people who've had those experiences and been through that myself is that we're so constantly in fight or flight that we don't even know that we are in that space. It's like a physical disconnect for survival reasons. And so when I left the abusive relationship, I hadn't had a hormonal cycle for 2.5, 3 years. And then 2 weeks after I left, they came back again because I'd come out of fight or flight and my body had gone, oh, look, I'm safe. What I've done here is I've created the entire house to be somewhere that feels energetically safe. So visually, it feels safe. Energetically, it feels safe. And the people within it feel safe. So me, my son, and my partner, when he comes, the cat, all of us always feel safe. That's the number one most priority when creating a structure, is a feeling of emotional and physical safety.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think with the work that both of us do, it's absolutely foundational. You cannot work with people unless they feel completely safe.
Yes.
So safety is definitely the underlying factor in any type of healing, restoration, vibrational work that you do. So I'm really pleased that you brought that up. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that what you've been able to create energetically around you, that it is this expression of you and your heart. And I wondered what effort do you have to put in to maintain that now?
I still do it daily. I don't need to do it as much. But I still, every night before bed, I set my intention, I do my boundary setting, and there's a script that I say as an invocation out loud in my head. I am setting my intention to create the highest expression for my sleep. I know my thoughts are things, I know my words are powerful. And so I know my intention is really key and important. So I'm always very mindful that I set my space then.
So I want to ask you a special favor. Would you be willing to share this invocation or mantra that you use before you go to sleep?
It's quite long, but yes, I'll share with you the start of it.
Okay.
And then because it is quite long. So it starts off like, we open the field in sacred service to the law of one. North, south, east, west, earth, sky, heart, and space. We direct the four corners to be sealed in the light of unity and oneness. We are impenetrable. We are invincible. We ask our guardians, our guides, our higher God selves, and evolutionary support teams and starseed identities to come in to support us and guide us this evening during sleep state. And then it goes on like that.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. And if you wouldn't mind letting us have a copy of that, I'll put that below because I think that could be an incredible contribution to people's sleep and life.
It's not mine, by the way. It is by a lady called Lisa Renee from Energetic Synthesis. It's her work that has really underpinned all the stuff that I do here. And I absolutely would not have got through all of my dark arts training, my healing, or anything like that if it hadn't have been for the resources that she offers on her site.
Amazing. Thank you. What could you say her name again?
Lisa Renee, Renee.
Because I was going to ask you, have you done all this work yourself, or what sort of professional or help have you had from friends or readings or courses that you've done that have been the most impactful in this process of healing your home and yourself?
It's her work. She's all about creating empowerment through you taking responsibility for your own actions. So she provides the tools. You can be part of her community. It's not a lot at all each month. And she has a whole glossary of information that you can just go through and use and put in place every single day. And that most of that is free on her website. So I started that in 2016. And I devoured all of her information because what I'm looking for energetically is clarity of truth and intention. I was looking for something where the aim of the work was empowerment and self-sovereignty. That wasn't meaning that I was having to become reliant on somebody else to provide me this information. It was up to me, and I needed that kind of clear clarity. Even though I wanted support and guidance, I knew I needed to take ownership of that for myself. And so what's incredible about her work is that it's so crystal clear in its delivery. And so I was able to take all of her work and just start practicing it every day. If you want to support yourself, do this and give this a go for 90 days and see what happens. And so I became very curious about my experience, and I went, okay, well, I'm going to give that a go and see if I feel any different by the end of it. And I did. It just kept reinforcing a sense of boundary and safety and inner trust. And I thought, I don't want to be in another situation where somebody else takes responsibility for me. I want to be responsible for me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So this sounds like an incredibly empowering experience where you found somebody who had resources you could tap into and experiment with and experience for yourself and put into practice and be able to filter out the most useful things about that, but without creating another sort of dependency. That's an incredible thing that there was so much there for you to be able to explore and bring in so that you could do that to your home. I wonder, now that you've done this amazing work in your home, what is it like going into other people's homes? Have you ever been into anyone's home where you found something similar that they've been able to create?
So no, I haven't been into anybody else's home yet where they've been able to create something like that. Not clearly, no. But I've had the luxury of being able to put my own stamp on this place, and it is just me. And because I've got a minor in here, I'm responsible for his energetic frequency too. And so for some of my friends who have a contrasting structure within their husbands or wives or whatever, when the two of those come together, it's not as easy to create an energetic structure in a place because you've got two adults that are creating a structure together. So the structure of these two people creates discordance, right? Or often on some level, and it's not always as harmonious. So when I go into other people's houses and there's often conflict or things aren't flowing quite as harmoniously as the people within them would like, or there's other stuff going on, it means that it's not quite as easy to create that structure that you're looking for or would like because of the personalities that are different.
Absolutely, because we're so different in our relationships, and fortunate people are aligned energetically so that they're creating more of a mosaic structure with both the different energies, which then works. And I would love to know, Dawn, what importance would you put on people doing work on the energetic structure of their home in terms of the whole healing picture?
I am looking for all ways to help anybody feel empowered and self-loving. And so if there are spaces that in your home that don't feel good, then there's normally an element that's connected to either disempowerment or self-rejection. So if I'm thinking about how do you create a healthy structure in your home, then I would be doing the inner work to affect the outer structure of your home, as well as creating a healthy energetic boundary within your home at the same time. Then I would say start with one room that you want to feel safe in and start small. So, for example, I started off with my living room. So my living room was somewhere where I would meditate, I would do yoga, where I would sit and journal. And it was a place where I painted the walls a gorgeous blue color, and I had lots of plants, and it felt very alive. So each time I was in that room, I always felt good and I always felt safe. And so, especially when you're coming out of domestic violence, to have one space in your house that feels safe and secure is so fundamental to healing, as we literally just talked about that safety piece, that I would start with one space, because energetically, when you're in trauma or coming out of trauma or working with trauma or in any sort of fight or flight situation, your energetic field feels easily compromised. And so you haven't really got ownership of your own energetic field. And so by starting small with your own energetic field, then it's easier then to start creating an energetic space within one room. And so the more you practice that diligently every day, 3 times a day, like I did, the easier it becomes to just gently keep pushing it out so it takes up more space.
Mm. And where do you think that energy is? Is that in the space around you? Is it in the walls? Is it in the atmosphere? How does that work?
Have you ever read the book As If the God in All Things Mattered by Michaela Small something or other? I can't remember her surname. It's really cool. She talks about how you can talk with the devas of your garden and the consciousness of the plants and the trees and all that kind of stuff. So I imagine my house being a living, breathing organism that I'm co-creating with. So if there are things within my house that are living and breathing and thriving as well, it's because they're in accordance with the energy that I'm creating in here. So where does it end? I don't know. To me, the walls are the walls and they belong to this house, but we're in co-creation of making a house together where everything's its own separate experience now these days. So even the plants, I ask the plants where they want to be and where they thrive, and I'm constantly moving them around if they want to be moved around to find a better place for them. So the energy for me is moving within the home all of the time. It's not stagnant, so it's not sat in the walls, it's not sat anywhere, it's kind of just contained within this living, breathing experience in my home.
I absolutely adore this concept of having a living, breathing home, because of course it is energy and energy moves, but I think it's also a very radical idea.
Oh, really?
The majority of people think of their homes as being static. It's a roof, it's walls, it's an atmosphere, and it's empty. It's just empty space. But of course, you and I both know that there's no such thing as empty space. It's alive. Space is alive. If you're intuitive, you can walk into a space and you can feel the difference in different spaces. And when it's cleared, you can hear the voices so much more clearly. Everything changes when you do this work. But I'm not sure how many people are actually doing this work. I think a lot of people are focusing on trauma in the body and trauma.
It's a good place to start.
It's a great place to start, in the body and in the energy field, and let's work with that. But if you just go to the therapist or the coach or the healer, and then you go home to a home that is stagnant, that is stuck in the past, that has all these residues from the past, and perhaps psychic activity going on, and as you said, things went on the land, even if it's a new build, people think, oh, it's a new build. If I paint the walls, that's going to make all the difference. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. There's a lot of very intricate work that needs to go on to identify what these layers are that are still present, and to be able to release those, just like releasing the trauma from the body, you have to release the trauma that the home is carrying. Because I think sometimes when we repress energies or overexpress them, as in the case of violence and abuse, where does that energy go? It has to go somewhere. So it's moving around in the space that you're in. And because it's energy, it can be transformed and turned around.
Definitely. I would also say that I didn't start off being energetically sensitive. I knew I was a highly sensitive person, an empath, people pleaser, that kind of stuff, but I didn't, well, on some level, I didn't even know those things, right? I just didn't know. And so I've learnt over time these tools and techniques, and I've practiced them with a lot of faith at times and trust. But I didn't start off there. I started off just sitting on my bed. And I remember back in 2001, I picked up a book on meditation and I had a panic attack because I thought I was going to be learning something absolutely life-threatening. And so this was the Dummy's Guide to Meditation, I remember.
That
And
yellow and black, but that yellow and black book, the one.
Yeah.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah. So I found it so terrifying to think that I was delving into the unknown that I never revisited that until about 10 years ago. And then what I should say is I started listening to a lady called Julie Pyatt, who is the wife of a ultra athlete called Rich Roll, who came across my bookshelf when I was spending nights and nights and nights breastfeeding alone in the dark with my son, and I had his book on my Kindle, and he led me to his wife, and I was listening to their podcast, and she was an extremely spiritual woman, and I just felt like she was talking my language, and I didn't understand most of what she was saying, but the resonance was so strong that I often felt like I just had to keep listening to it, like it was an energetic frequency exchange. And just hearing her talk was creating a magnificent and profound shift within me. She started doing things like running the violet flame through my body nighttime, and even that was terrifying, like absolutely terrifying. I had no idea what I was doing or letting myself in for. My fear brain was just on fire, and yeah. So I started very, very slowly, because otherwise I knew I was going to have a panic attack. Slowly, I just started to explore more and more and more. And it took time. And I was very gentle with myself because I knew that if I pushed it, I would just go into fear and then I wouldn't be able to go anywhere with that. So I started listening to her stuff. And that's why I've created all of these visualizations, meditations, boundary stuff on my podcast, so that people have a gentle, easy way of accessing this information to start off with.
Right. Incredible work. And I just think it's absolutely fascinating and so important that you've brought in this missing piece today about how we can influence, upgrade, change, and shift our environments to make them safe and to make them a vibrational heart match to ourselves, and the difference that can make when we put efforts into that. Because I know a lot of people are suffering in environments that don't feel good, or they're aware of it. As a child, I was very aware that I was living in a massive haunted house and all these earthbound souls walking up and downstairs doing all this stuff. But all I could do was suffer it, Dawn, because I had no clue how to deal with it. And I didn't even know that I could deal with it, or I could release them or help them, what they needed. I had no clue. I was just coexisting with them. And I think a lot of people do coexist with things. They might have a certain amount of awareness that things are going on, or every time they go home, they feel depressed or they feel drained or they have no energy. And I know so many people like that. They have such low motivation, such low energy, such poor sleep. And they don't realize that it started when they moved house, or when an abusive partner moved out. They started to become aware that actually there was a lot more going on in their environmental energy that they were aware of. They might start thinking, well, if I just change things around, if I move the furniture around, or I change the walls. And it does help. It does help because everything has energy. But you have brought this piece today so beautifully for us about how much more we can do to work with these energies in our homes, to make them safe, to make them into sanctuaries where we can really thrive and relax and create something so different to what other people do. So you're a very rare gem, Dawn, and I'm so grateful that you have come to share this great wisdom and learning about how we can empower ourselves to work not just with our own healing, but with the healing of our environments in such beautiful, gentle, step-by-step ways. So I thank you for being so open and for sharing so much with us. And I know that this is really going to stimulate so much more awareness within people and inspiration, that they don't just have to suffer things in the way that they are, but that they can,
Yes.
there's a lot more that they can do to make themselves feel safe. And even starting small. I love what you said about starting small with one room 3 times a day. This breaks it down for people to see where they can start, and that anyone can start. It's not overwhelming, and everything that you do is going to make a difference.
Yes.
So any last thoughts that you want to share with us before we finish?
I think maybe just reiterate the significance of creating a safe environment, even before you start really working on all of the extra energetic tools. It's had such a profound impact on not only my own recovery from abuse, but the safety and the security for my son living through this experience too has been so grounding. If I think about what the alternative could have been like for him, and yet my focus has been 100% on creating safety, and it has been the foundation for both of us to feel stronger, healthier, and able to explore more in every way. I hear a lot of people who've been through domestic violence, who are in domestic violence situations, or who have lived trauma, and they don't feel safe. And if you don't feel safe in your own home, then you will perpetually feel disempowered, helpless, hopeless, and vulnerable. And that's no way for anybody to live. So start there. It's really important.
Amazing guidance and advice and wisdom. Thank you so much, Dawn, for being on my podcast today and sharing so much and empowering people. I will be putting your information below the podcast. Anybody who feels inspired, wants to be in touch with Dawn, you'll have the details below, and also the names of her mantra that she shared with us. So thank you so much, Dawn. You have been the most amazing guest. And
thank you very much, Catherine.
And I have been your host, Catherine Beer, on the Problem Properties podcast. I will see you again next week. But for now, it's goodbye from Dawn and goodbye.